Hey, Sip&Talkers, and welcome back to the show. It's Joe. He's here with the one and only Sunny. What's up, Sunny? So, anything exciting happening in your world lately? You won't believe this. I finally caved and tried that lavender honey latte everyone's been raving about, and oh my goodness, it's like a spa day for your taste buds. But, okay, enough about my caffeine adventures. Let's talk about the big thing that's on everyone's mind. The election. I mean, can you believe it's almost over? This whole thing has been like a roller coaster of emotions. Seriously. It's like the entire country has been holding its breath for the past year. And speaking of holding our breath, this whole election thing, it really got me thinking. It's like a giant case study in desire and addiction, right? So let's dive into that. Today, we're going deep into the world of desire and addiction. From the political landscape all the way to our own personal lives. Buckle up, Sip&Talkers. It's going to be a wild ride.
You know, what's really fascinating about this particular election is how it just puts the hunger for power on full display, not just for the candidates themselves, but for the voters too, right? It's like this primal urge to win, to be on the right side. It just takes over everything.
Totally. You see politicians pouring everything they have, their hearts, their souls, their money, millions and millions of dollars into these crazy campaigns. And then you've got voters out there, you know, canvassing, debating. I mean, I've even heard of people losing friends over their political beliefs.
Yeah. And it's not just about winning, right? It's also about belonging. People just crave that sense of community, that feeling of being part of something bigger than themselves. And political parties, they sort of offer that, don't they? This like framework for understanding the world. A set of shared values, a tribe to belong to.
Yeah, it's like that deep-seated need to be in the in-group. But you know what's interesting is that when that desire to belong turns into this blind allegiance, like an addiction to being right, that's when things get kind of messy.
Oh, absolutely. It's like we lose sight of the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
Finding common ground, having a decent conversation. And instead we get sucked into this us versus them thing.
Yeah, exactly. And you know who I think plays a huge role in fueling that fire? The media. I mean, think about it. Ratings, clicks, shares. It's all about grabbing our attention, and conflict sells.
Well, yeah. There's actually research showing that our brains are wired to respond more strongly to negativity and threats.
Wow.
So it's not really a surprise that, you know, especially these days with the internet and everything, news outlets are fighting for our attention with like the most sensational headlines and stories that trigger our fear and outrage.
It's like they're feeding off our desire for the drama. And in the process, they're shaping how we see the world, often in ways that aren't really objective.
Exactly. What's even more concerning is this whole rise of algorithms and these filter bubbles, you know, these online echo chambers. They just keep feeding us information that reinforces what we already believe, and it makes it way harder to even consider other perspectives.
Yeah, it's like we're all living in our own little worlds, getting this constant stream of information that just confirms our biases. No wonder everyone's so divided these days.
It's a tough one for sure. But here's the thing. Just like politicians and voters can get caught up in that desire for power and belonging, we can also get addicted to information, you know? Addicted to the constant stimulation and the validation we get from these online platforms.
Wow, that's deep. So basically what you're saying is we're all susceptible to desire and addiction, whether it's on a big stage like politics or even just in our own digital lives. Okay, so let's bring this a little closer to home, because it's not just politicians and, you know, news junkies who struggle with these things, right? We all experience desire and addiction in our everyday lives.
Oh, you're absolutely right. We all have desires for connection, for pleasure, for security even. And these desires, they're a natural part of being human.
Totally. Who doesn't love a delicious meal or a little romance or, you know, a shiny new gadget every now and then? These things make life fun. But when does that harmless desire cross the line and become an addiction?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's not always easy to know exactly when a healthy desire turns into something unhealthy.
Yeah. Like, I love chocolate, but I'm not exactly raiding the pantry at midnight. So where's that tipping point?
One way to think about it is the level of control. When a desire starts running the show, when it's all you can think about and it starts dictating what you do, when it's messing with your relationships, your work, your well-being, that's when you know it's a problem.
So it's about recognizing when a desire stops being something that adds to your life and starts becoming something that controls it.
Exactly. And this can apply to all kinds of desires, from the ones that seem harmless to the ones that are more obviously a problem. We've talked about power and information, but think about the desire for stuff, for the latest gadgets, the trendiest clothes, a bigger house.
Oh, yeah. The classic keeping up with the Joneses. It's like we're always being told we need to buy more, have more, be more.
Yeah, and that constant need for more, it can easily turn into a shopping addiction, where you're just accumulating things to fill some kind of void or to get validation or to escape from other issues.
So we've got the desire for power, the desire for information, the desire for stuff, and then there's the big one. The desire for,
Let's just call it the desire for connection, for intimacy, for pleasure.
Right. And that's a natural and healthy part of being human. But like all these other desires, it can become a problem when it takes over our lives.
Exactly. And it's not even just about how much of something you're doing, but also the quality of those experiences. Are we doing these things in a way that's healthy? Is it consensual? Does it align with our values? Or are we using these things to escape, to numb ourselves, to avoid dealing with stuff that's really bothering us?
Whoa. Those are some serious questions. This conversation is really making me think about how much our desires shape our lives. Everything from our political opinions to the choices we make every day. It's like a constant tug of war between what we want and what we actually need. I'm starting to think we need a little sip break. We'll be right back with even more juicy insights into the world of desire and addiction. Stay tuned. I just want to give another shout out to Micky from Mickytolife. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it.
And we're back, Sip&Talkers, ready for round 2 in the world of desire and addiction. Before the break, we were talking about how desires, even the ones that seem harmless, can turn into straight-up addictions if we're not careful.
It's true. And one of the sneakiest things about addiction is that it often disguises itself as something else. It can look like ambition or love or even just having a good time.
Right. So how do we know when we've crossed that line, when a desire has become a full-blown addiction? What are the red flags?
One of the clearest signs is when the desire starts controlling you instead of the other way around. It becomes this obsession. It takes over your thoughts. It tells you what to do, and it ends up disrupting your whole life.
So like if I'm spending hours every day online shopping and I'm neglecting my work and my relationships, that's a pretty big sign that my love for a good deal has turned into a problem, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about the time and energy you're putting into it. It's about the consequences.
Yeah.
Are you seeing negative things happening in your life because of this desire?
So if I'm maxing out all my credit cards, getting into debt, and fighting with my partner about how much I'm spending, that's a pretty strong indicator that something's not right.
Absolutely. And a lot of times the person struggling with the addiction will go to great lengths to hide the problem or downplay it. Even from themselves. They'll try to justify their behavior or minimize the damage or blame other people for their struggles.
It's like a defense mechanism, right? A way to avoid facing the truth.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to talk about these things openly and honestly, to get rid of the stigma and the shame that comes with addiction, and to create a space where people feel like they can ask for help.
I totally agree. So let's dive into some specific examples of everyday desires that can morph into addictions. We've talked about shopping addiction. What about something like gaming addiction? It seems like that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue, especially among young people.
It's true. Video games are designed to be really engaging and rewarding. They trigger the release of dopamine in the brain, which makes you feel good and accomplished. And for some people, that can be super addictive.
Especially with those online games where you can connect with friends and compete against people all over the world. It's like a whole other reality that can be hard to escape.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that gaming addiction often goes hand in hand with other mental health stuff like anxiety and depression. People might use gaming as a way to deal with stress or loneliness or feeling isolated.
So it's not just about the game itself. It's about the reasons why someone might be so drawn to it in the first place.
Right, and it's the same with other kinds of addictions like internet addiction or social media addiction. The digital world offers this constant connection and entertainment and validation, which can be really hard to resist, especially for people who struggle with relationships in real life or with their self-esteem.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with these super stimulating experiences that mess with our brains and lead to these compulsive behaviors.
And the more we do those things, the more our brains get wired to want them, which makes it even harder to break free from the cycle.
So it's like this vicious cycle feeding on itself.
Yeah.
Yikes. But where does that leave us? Are we all doomed to become slaves to our desires?
Not necessarily. While it's true that we all have desires and some of them can lead to unhealthy addictions, we also have the power to choose how we respond to them. We can learn to recognize what triggers us and develop healthier ways of coping and ultimately build a more balanced relationship with the things that tempt us.
Okay, so it's not about getting rid of desire altogether. It's about learning to manage it and channel it in a way that makes our lives better instead of worse.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between enjoying things and being in control, between savoring the good stuff without letting it take over.
I like that. It's about taking back control and becoming the architects of our own experiences instead of just passively consuming whatever desires come our way.
Precisely. And that's an ongoing process. It takes self-awareness, self-reflection, and self-regulation. It's not always easy, but it's so worth it.
Speaking of self-mastery, I'm suddenly feeling this urge to master the art of making the perfect cocktail. How about we take a little sip break and come back with some practical tips for managing our desires in a healthy way?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, Sip and Talkers, we're back.
Yeah.
And, the big question is, how do we actually manage these desires in a healthy way? I mean, we talk about all the bad stuff, but how about the good stuff? How do we take that desire energy and actually use it for good?
That's what I love about this. It's like taming a wild horse. You don't want to break its spirit, but you got to steer it so you both end up where you want to be.
Oh, I love that analogy. So, how do we even start? I'm picturing myself trying to lasso a bucking bronco of desire.
First things first. Awareness. It's like turning on a spotlight and seeing those desires hiding in the dark. What are they, and why are they so strong?
So, if I catch myself scrolling through social media every night instead of going to the gym like I planned, that's my cue to stop and ask, what's really going on here?
Exactly. Maybe you're craving connection, or maybe you're avoiding something you don't want to deal with. Once you know the root of the problem, you can tackle it head on.
That makes sense. It's like, instead of just giving in to the craving, I'm becoming a detective for my own desires.
And that's where the healthy channeling comes in. Let's say you're dying to check social media. Instead of just mindlessly scrolling, how about actually connecting with a friend in real life? Or joining a group that's all about your hobbies?
Ooh, I like that. It's like taking that same desire energy and putting it towards something that's more fulfilling and, maybe even productive.
Exactly. You're finding healthier ways to express those desires.
Okay, so awareness and redirection. What else do we need in our desire taming toolkit?
Boundaries, my friend. You got to draw a line in the sand and tell your desires how far they can go.
So that's like setting a time limit for social media or having a day each week where I don't spend any money?
You got it. It's about making conscious choices about how you engage with your desires instead of letting them run wild.
I think a big part of this is also about mindfulness. Just really paying attention to what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Oh, absolutely. When you're mindful, you're less likely to get swept away by those impulsive desires. You can take a breath, think it through, and then make a choice.
So instead of grabbing that third cookie without even thinking about it, I take a second to really savor the first two and actually appreciate the experience.
Now you're getting it. And that brings us to another key tool, gratitude. When you focus on what you already have, you're less likely to obsess over what you don't.
Wow, my mind is blown. So basically, by being aware, setting boundaries, practicing mindfulness, and being grateful, we can actually transform how we relate to our desires. It's like turning that wild bronco into a horse we can actually ride.
That's a great way to put it. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be times you stumble, but the important thing is to keep learning, keep growing, and keep working towards that balance.
Wow, this whole conversation has been eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of desire. It's not something to be afraid of or try to shut down, but something to understand and work with.
And that's what makes it so powerful. When we embrace our desires and learn how to work with them, we can unlock a whole new level of happiness and fulfillment in our lives.
Well said. All right, Sip and Talkers, that wraps up our deep dive into the fascinating world of desire and addiction. We hope you got as much out of this episode as we did.
And if you're thirsty for more adventures and exploration and, of course, amazing drinks, be sure to check out the Mickytolife YouTube channel.
You won't regret it. All right, folks, until next time, keep sipping, keep talking, and keep exploring. Peace out from Joe and Sunny.